Welcome to Understand the Times and report from Kenya. This morning I'm sitting with Pastor Brent Harrell from Rome, Italy, and Kevin Fox from Eston, Saskatchewan. And we've had, I think now this is our fourth day of ministry in the location where we are, traveling around visiting Bryce homes. Pastor Brent did a teaching, actually several teachings to the pastors in one location. Yesterday, both of them were in attendance at different churches. So this morning what I want to talk about is after observing, and Kevin, you've been here, this is your second year, observing pastors and the churches. What do you think are the greatest needs here in Kenya, and what could be done in the future to meet some of the needs?
The needs for the pastors that I see are they need sound doctrine, they need teaching. A lot of the pastors have none. They got saved and within a year were pastoring with zero teaching. They just got a Bible and read a few verses and started teaching. So you can imagine the type of problems that lends itself to.
And a lot of the ideas that come from Westerners who pass through Kenya and stop around and yell and scream, and their doctrine is way off the base, and so some of that's transferred to them. And it seems to me that a lot of the churches are established more like businesses rather than Christian ministries.
Mm-hmm. That's what I found too. It's a means. It's a job. It's a means to make money for some of them, and they need a touch of the Holy Spirit, and they need sound training to
Absolutely.
know how to teach the Bible properly.
So, Brent, you taught. There was a number of pastors, and the comments were, "Wow, can we get this guy back?" And this is the first time we've ever heard the Bible taught systematically and verse by verse, and they were really amazed. What was your perspective?
Yeah, I definitely got the impression that they were, in one sense, overwhelmed, and in another sense, inspired. You know, they made comments like this wasn't teaching. This was like a school of ministry. And then they were asking that they were actually telling me that this needed to be like 3 days of these kinds of teachings, because I was just trying to instruct them in what expositional teaching was, giving them simple concepts like inductive Bible study method, how that works, how you let the text speak for itself, the concept of kind of verse by verse, chapter by chapter, teaching the whole Word of God, the whole Bible, and letting God's Word speak to people, and challenging the people to have their own Bibles, to study the Bible, to meditate in the Bible, and to be responsible and accountable to the pastors and teachers. So it was pretty illuminating for me, and definitely speaks to how I think God might want me involved in the future in Kenya, as far as just equipping pastors. You know, my calling and passion has always been equipping the saints and making disciples and raising up leaders where I am, church planning. But here you see that it's a desperate need.
Well, I agree with you entirely. We've been involved here in some way in ministry now for about 6 years, and established a pretty extensive program. Now we have, over 40 widows, and the numbers of pastors we've added to the program to be able to assist us in not only distribution of food, but to provide spiritual assistance.
Yeah.
And so what we want now is establish good sound doctrine within the program, so that we can be influenced, not just within the Bryce Homes program, but actually to the communities here, because there's a great need. Yesterday when I came back from church, I came a little earlier, and right across the fence here from the hotel is a church, and I thought somebody needed to call the police. I'd never heard anything like it. Just the yelling and the screaming. And one of the things that if you go around the streets here on a Sunday morning, there seems to be a competition on how loud they can shout.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a lot of teaching. I think it's a lot of emotion.
Yeah. They don't get into the word very much, and when they do, it's not as much instructional as it is just kind of, yeah. So,
yes.
Yeah, just, I mean, from my perspective as a newcomer to the program and the ministry here, I'm amazed at what has taken place in 6 years. I think it was awesome that it was birthed out of meeting desperation, helping the poorest of the poor, widows that were malnourished, dying. Many of them with sicknesses and diseases, which the nutritional side, it makes the difference between somebody who can live with such a thing versus somebody who just dies. With orphans, all these kinds of things. So to see that is the important thing, is helping people live, helping people survive, helping them get on their feet, giving them shelter. But now you see, as a newcomer into it, you see the next best thing to help balance the scale of really bringing health in every way to their lives is to now help them on the instructional and doctrinal side so that they can have stable spiritual lives.
Exactly. And as Lucio describes it, they need holistic training. They need to know how to survive in this country, but they need to be spiritually instructed so that their entire lives are fulfilled. Now, speaking of Lucio, he did an excellent presentation sharing about the possibility of establishing a discipleship center.
Mm-hmm.
And the other day we were at the location where we've actually put a down payment on the property, which turns out to be about 12 acres.
Yeah.
In a very fertile area that has great potential right alongside the riverbed. And you've heard some of them commenting with regards to if this could happen, what it would do for this part of Kenya.
Yeah.
What do you see? Is that it would be a necessary part of our future long-term planning?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, the vision that they have, the vision that the team has collectively to take that land in an area where the Bryce Homes ministry is already being successful, where there's many Bryce Homes and orphans and widows that are on their way to, being healthy, and then there's a church there now as well, and so they're getting spiritual care, and they're becoming a body of Christ, and they're beginning to kind of reach out and have an impact on the community around them. And so the next step there is with that training center to see many more resources, the teaching, the instruction, the equipping of people to have skills, to be able to kind of become entrepreneurs, to be able to become self-sustaining, and for the program itself to become self-sustaining, that it wouldn't always just be depending on outside resources, but that the resources initially would be helpful in clearing the land and preparing it, and maybe building a structure and helping with initial investments, so that they could then use those investments to plant crops, plant trees, teach people how to be doing those things. And then as people go away from that discipleship reality trained, they can go out into their regions or further out into Kenya, and they've got a skill, they've got spiritual discipleship and training. They're more mature believers that could not only begin to work and live for themselves by the training that they've gained, but then they can begin to make other disciples and reach people for the kingdom of Jesus Christ.
So, Brent, for a number of years you felt led to somehow come to Kenya and at least make observation. And obviously the Lord put us together. We've been friends for a number of years. This summer when I was in Rome, when I mentioned that I was headed off to Kenya probably February, March, I said, "Are you interested in going?" And you said yes, and so here we are.
Yeah, I didn't even have to bat an eye. I
No.
knew the Lord was already preparing my heart, and when the opportunity presented itself, I was on top of it.
So now you've had several days to make observation, and you've already mentioned that you see great need in instruction for leaders and leadership and good Bible training. So if God provides in the future, are you willing to come back and maybe bring others with you that would provide seminar teaching and doctrinal instruction?
Definitely. I think that that's going to be my principal role in doing ministry in Kenya. The gracious side of the Father's heart in me
Yes.
would want to be very involved. I could give money to everybody that I run into, and I could try to get money to give more money because I just want to give money to people to help them to buy food, to pay for their rent. The living conditions here are very third world, compared to most anything that I've seen outside of being in Mexico years ago. And I haven't been further east in Asia or anything like that yet, but I believe that the Lord's trying to kind of speak to me about just being restrained and not hurting people by helping in a way that I think would be helpful, but in concentrating on equipping these leaders and pastors and teaching so that they can begin to make some adjustments in the way that they approach church and Christianity and discipleship, so that they can really begin to have strong, stable leadership structures themselves, but then be making disciples that are healthy, that can also then be a part of ministry, can be a part of the kingdom, can be using their talents and gifts and callings, but then also that they can be making disciples as well.
Well, everything you're telling me fits in exactly with the vision that God's placed in my heart. The reason I came here wasn't just to come and teach pastors and teach doctrine, although we did come and do a conference. But when I came here, I was sort of on a scouting trip to see how we could come alongside orphans, poor children, because that was part of our vision, the Bryce Holmes program, which really started out in a program in remembrance of our son Bryce. But I want to see that program expand. I want to see it become a model where it becomes a much broader program that will affect entire communities and then eventually countries through the expansion, through good Bible teaching.
Well, I think just what I've seen so far, that it went from, 1 and then 2 and then 5, and then now you've got over 50 Bryce Holmes recipients that in one way or another are getting helped with shelter and food, and even some of them are already growing and prospering within this opportunity to kind of become self-sustaining and become even entrepreneurs, and they're getting the spiritual side. And so when I see what I'm seeing, and the area, the regions that it is already impacted in just the last 6 years, I can't imagine what could happen in the next couple of years, 2 to 5 years, as you do begin to augment, you grow, because you guys aren't just, the Bryce Holmes program isn't just trying to help the poor and then keep them dependent on that help, but it's convinced the local board and these pastors that are running this ministry, they've got a vision, and they understand that the heart and the direction is to help temporarily. It's to give people shelter and hope and food and nourishment and spiritual nourishment, so that they can get on their feet and create opportunities for themselves, and that then they could get off of that assistance at one point, and then that assistance can go to other people, and then maybe they could even begin investing in people's lives themselves outside of using the Bryce Holmes resources or finances that are coming in from the outside. So you get the Bryce Holmes ministry continuing, the cycle continues as more orphans and widows are picked up, And as it gets spread further out, but then also you get those who have been beneficiaries of the program, and as they kind of graduate, as it were, as they get off of the support and the dependence, they become self-sustaining, and then they begin to help others. And so you really have a more vastly multiplying reality, than just the Bryce Holmes Ministry doing it alone. It begins to become those who have been blessed by the Bryce Holmes Ministry. They catch the vision too, and then they begin doing it. So it's quite an exceptional thing to see. It's really a blessing to witness what God's doing here.
Well, you have described in words much better than I can what our objective has been from the beginning, and now it's been accomplished. And my prayer would be that our leaders in other countries, like in Myanmar, in India, the Philippines, and other places where we work, would hear just what you said, because you formulated in words our absolute vision. This is not a welfare program. We need to begin with welfare in order to get some of these people back, essentially to keep them from dying. But after we get them on their feet, they need to be looking at ways that they can support themselves and support others. Yesterday we were with Leah. I've done a program with Leah previously, and we talked about her. But yesterday we went and visited her because her children pleaded with the mother, with Leah, that they would please bring these foreigners who had helped them so much come to their house. And a very humble house indeed, 2-room place.
Very humble, very humble.
And Leah, reason we got to know her, actually, she's one of the workers here at this hotel where we're staying. And she's meagerly paid. In fact, sometimes not even paid. Maybe the third month she doesn't receive pay till 3 months later, and she has to rent a house.
And then she doesn't even get the full 3 months back pay.
No, she only gets partial payment, and that's when I met her last year. She was in that condition, and she has these 4 children, and the 4 children essentially didn't have food to eat. She didn't have food to eat, didn't have food to pay her rent, and she was totally depressed in desperation. So in 1 year, we were able to get her on her feet by providing food and some assistance towards her rent. Now, here's what we talked about yesterday. So, Leo, where to from here? What would you like to do? What would you like to see? And of course, the children offered it would be great to have a house that's more than 2 rooms, so that at night we can do our homework rather than our mother cook when she comes home at 9 o'clock from work.
Yeah, I think it's important too when we say 2 rooms that the people listening understand that we're talking about 2 rooms that are the size of many bathrooms in the West. So we're talking about a little house with a roof on it that has cement walls, cement floors, and at that it's kind of ghetto.
Oh, totally ghetto. So she's surviving. And so what I suggested, and we're going to pray about this, and we're going to talk with our board, but I think here's a situation where we could come alongside Leah, and help her fully with her rent, fully with her food, and then provide her with support so that she can start her own business. She already had that plan. She wants to be able to buy and sell fruit and have her own little fruit stand. And then she can work towards self-sufficiency. So this would be a great step forward. The other thing that shocked me about talking to Leah is she said that after her husband died, her husband's mother, which is the children's grandmother, wanted to sell the children, the girls that were 12 and 14, for a dowry, which means to sell them to some older man to marry, to have sex, and get money, rather than raise these kids and think about their needs. Take from them and use them as literally product. It's hard for the Westerners for us to believe.
Yeah, it's just it's shocking at best, deplorable, horrific, and scary. But yet, the beautiful thing of the story, of Leah's story, is that she resisted, she rejected that, she wanted to protect her daughters, And even though she lost her property and her home that basically got confiscated by her husband's family,
Right.
and she was left out in the cold with no home, no shelter, no food, no resources, she was willing to attempt that simply to protect her daughters, which might not be the common position. Many women may have actually gone to that, which Westerners can understand, that girls would be sold as a way of survival. Even sometimes we can't even morally understand how a grandma could bring herself to do such a thing, and yet here it's not as much of a moral issue for them as it is just survival. It's just, I want to live, and therefore, and sometimes they may even actually justify it by thinking it's a way that these granddaughters may live.
Yeah.
But either way, we wouldn't accept that or like it, and Leah didn't, and she stood on principle, and by God's grace, He sustained her. The Bryce Homes program came along, began helping her, and now it's looking like, if it works out and the board makes that decision and she gets just a little bit. I mean, I think the listeners need to understand that we're talking about her monthly pay, which she never gets paid, is $30 a month.
Right.
Or am I wrong? Am I correct?
No, $30 a month if she gets
paid, and then her rent
it's 35.
is 35. So I mean, if the Bryce Homes Ministry program was not giving her food on a monthly basis, and we're talking about the staples of Africans and Kenyans, we're talking about corn, rice, beans, maybe sugar and soap. So if it hadn't been for the Bryce Homes program, her and her daughters would not be eating. They would not be healthy, let alone, surviving. And then they began to talk about the little details of trying to do homework. The mother, they don't understand. The listeners need to know, too, when we talk about the job she works and the money she makes, she works from like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.
14 hours a day.
14 hours a day. She does every aspect you can possibly imagine.
That's 7 days a week.
7 days a week. And so she and her kids get up at 5 o'clock to walk to school that starts at 8 o'clock. She gets home after 9 p.m. to then cook them dinner and get them to bed, maybe help them with a little bit of homework or something. And the daughters were saying, if we just had one more room, we could do our homework in one room, and Mom could cook and do the things in the other room. So we're not talking about giving someone simply 30 more, 50 more, 60 more American dollars a month to help her pay her rent, have the food that she's receiving, and then have a little bit of money to invest into this fruit that she could buy to then hopefully become, again, as we're talking about, self-sufficient and self-sustaining, to where eventually the food that she's been getting distributed by the Bryce Homes program can actually go to another widow in a similar situation.
So from your perspective, there's a lot of people who may be listening to this or will listen to it who are thinking, would this be a good investment? What you've observed here, 4 days, and it's only been a small portion of the Bryce Homes because we've been busy with other things like the pastoral teaching and going to church, but you've seen enough of the Bryce Homes program to see that there are families whose lives have been changed. So what kind of an investment do you think it would be for somebody if they said, hey, I want to help somebody in another part of the world who has nothing? Would this be a good place to be able to invest?
I can tell you as a missionary, as a missionary pastor, church planner for the last 17 years, where I haven't had a lot of extra money, where I live by faith and depend on support and the giving of gracious Americans who work hard and who sacrifice and give $20 a month here and there, churches who give $100 a month here and there, even as a missionary who now is finally kind of somewhat actually living and paying my bills, I can still go spend $30 or $50 in a day on groceries or food or some little. My kids go on field trips that cost €36. So when I began to look at these situations here and the desperation and the need and the idea that $30 a month or $50 a month, like not going to the movies with two people,
Not a real big sacrifice.
not a huge sacrifice for Westerners, and what that can do to touch a widow with 3, 4, 5 orphans. Some of these widows have their own kids, which are orphaned. They've lost their dad, and they're taking on 2 or 3 other orphans that sometimes are a part of their extended family, people who have died and their children had no adult supervision, no one to take them in and care for them. But some of them are even taking in just neighborhood kids that have no one to take care of them.
That doesn't happen in North America.
So these people are taking care of orphans, and they don't even have rice or money or corn or whatever it is to take care of themselves. So $30 to $50 a month, or even more, whatever it is going to be one of the best investments that they're ever going to make if they want to be Christians, living for the kingdom, living for the King, living for eternal purposes, investing not only into just helping humans eat and live and be healthy. We're not talking about 3 meals a day like Westerners eat, where they have a 3-course breakfast, a big fat lunch, and a huge dinner. We're talking about rice and beans.
We've got Kevin. Kevin's back with us. He had to move on for a few minutes, but Kevin, obviously, after being here 2 years, you've got a bigger perspective. We were talking about some of the families taking in orphans and providing for them, and they themselves have very, very little. Pastor Achilla, for example, and he's not overwhelmed with funds. His home is so full of people. I wondered, how can they possibly all sleep? Is that kind of the heart, the generosity that some of these people have, the Christians, to help out, reach around with help others?
The difference between Western culture and Kenyan culture in that way is really overwhelming. The people are outward focused. They care about their neighbors and the children. If they don't look after them, they know they will die. And Pastor Achilla's house is wall-to-wall people. When we were there, the grandmother, who is losing her mind a little bit.
100 years old.
100 years old.
100 years old. And she was worried about where we were all going to sleep, because she thought we were going to sleep there too. And she had quite concern on her face as to where everybody was going to lay. The house is full. They're not big houses, and they've taken in orphans, and there's another widow that just recently doesn't have a place to stay, and she's there with all her children. And the generosity of the pastor here makes me feel some shame because he gives all he has and then some.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to communicate this to people, especially in the West, who've never had to look for a meal in their lives. These people not only have to look for food, but in many cases, when it rains, they don't know how to stay dry. So it's a difficult, hard life, but great to be working here and seeing the fruit over the years. And we just pray that God would continue to open the doors and bless this ministry. I thank you for the people that around the world have contributed. Many different countries, many people that I've never met, but somehow when they listen to reports like this and read the reports that are posted, they catch the vision, and that's what has allowed this program to expand to where it is today. So we'll put this program, I'll draw it to an end, and we'll come up with another report in a few hours. Thank you so much for listening.